sure we're okay?
Yeah.
Okay, back for part 2. Lots of hilarity here. We're managing to delete videos and God knows what else. If anyone wants to know what the sounds are in the background, we're listening to Francisco Lopez with Untitled 228. Francisco Lopez is a kind of sound artist who works on kind of incredibly detailed soundscapes, overlaying masses and masses of different kind of sources, and he won't ever reveal what his sources are. So that's what's happening in the background. This is on the E2 label. It was a limited edition. It came out 2 or 3 years ago. That's background. Started off the second half of our session with a CD by the Nels Cline Singers, which is Devon Hoff on bass and Scott Amendola on drums. And the band's called the Nels Cline Singers. This is a kind of double CD package. Very beautiful artwork. Kind of makes you want to come out on vinyl just so you can have it in a big size of the Hadron Collider. Listen to track 7 on the first side, and I've forgotten the name of it. But Nels Cline's a kind of really good guitarist. Obviously, the kind of obviously playing currently with Wilco, but has a massive history before that in improvised music and jazz and so forth. And this is a real feast, this album. There's a studio CD and a live CD. Really worth listening to. Good stuff.
We've followed that up with some free, sort of from the very early 70s. The track I'll Be Creeping, which is off this double album, which is called The Free Story on Island. I guess I just really like the sound of this music and the rawness. I think they were all teenagers when they made their sort of first album or two, and it's just got a lovely kind of rough, innocent purity to it. So really enjoying that.
After playing Free and listening to Jimi Hendrix, I then went into a long reminiscence about going to the Isle of Wight Pop Festival when I was a teenager, which sent Mark to sleep, but he woke up eventually and came back to it. Anyway, that was a pretty formative time for me. Not quite sure why then we moved on to the Velvet Underground, but we did. And we played Here She Comes Now from the album White Heat, White Light. And this is seems to be quite a valuable record now. This is the original UK pressing on Verve and so forth. But anyway, still a great record, whether it's valuable or not.
Again, not an obvious choice to follow this, but possibly I imagine these musicians could well have been influenced by the Velvet Underground. They are about group, a bit of a sort of, I'm not really a super group, but a collection of people who play with other groups. So we've got Charles Hayward on drums, John Coxon, who, I'm not sure if he's not the guy with Hot Chip, is he? Maybe that's Alexis Taylor, and Pat Thomas. Anyway, 4 guys coming together for this album. Kind of quite hard to describe exactly what it sounds like. It's played very live, but there's some interesting electronics, there's some really strong songs, there's some nice grooves. It's just kind of quite quirky, quite UK sounding, quite contemporary. Just come out, really nice. Definitely one that you want to play a few times. The more you play, the more you get into it. So, about group. There it is.
Definitely my most interesting kind of new thing from the evening, I think. Actually, Pat Thomas is a great player. I mean, he's well known on the improvising circuit. Played with Lol Coxhill, played with Steve Beresford, played with all kinds of people. Really good, fantastic pianist, and great on keyboards as well. Very spurious link to the next one. I played a record by Steve Lacy with Alvin Curran and Frederick Retreski called Threads, and listened to a track called Broils. Now, Anders in Stockholm did a great 2-part post on Steve Lacy where he kind of talked about a number of different Steve Lacy. I think he probably did talk about this one, I can't remember actually, from a year ago. I mean, it's really worth checking out. If you're interested in... Lacy was a soprano saxophone player, played as a soloist, played with a huge range of different people, everyone from Thelonious Monk to Cecil Taylor, to working with people like Derek Bailey and improvisers and so forth. One of my favourite musicians. I have a vast number of Steve Lacy records. This is a really nice one on the Horror label from Italy. But also check out Anders' post, because it was a really useful, really interesting one. from about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, so there was some interesting kind of synthy sounds on that album, and that led me to pull this one, which is an EP called Electronic Movements, which is Tom Disavelt. And this album, this EP is just full of really interesting electronic sounds. It dates from 1962. Some people say this is the very, very first acid house record. Certainly had a long time to wait till acid house really formulated. But but really interesting record. You can hear stuff from this on YouTube. I think quite a rare EP. Very interesting.
I then went also 7-inch actually for no particular reason, but then we played a single by Robert Wyatt, which is him covering Chic's Last I Am Free. I'm a massive Robert Wyatt fan. I love his stuff actually. I love the fact he chose to cover this record. It's a 7-inch single. It's got a Last I Am Free on one side, and he covers Strange Fruit, which was of course made famous by Billie Holiday on the other side. Just typical idiosyncratic, brilliant kind of cover version by Robert, really.
So there's a great Robert Wyatt documentary that you can catch on YouTube that was made by the BBC, and in it Brian Eno sort of talks in a very passionate way about why Robert Wyatt is one of his two most significant influences and most important musicians who are currently living. So it kind of made sense to play some Brian Eno next. So we had a track off the amazing Another Green World, which I have on CD here, and we listened to the track called Becalmed.
Great stuff, actually. Now, I'm not quite sure what the chain of thought for the next one was, but then we went to one of the records by Old and New Dreams, which was a group that was formed by basically Ornette Coleman's band without Ornette, actually. So you have Don Cherry, Dewey Redman, Charlie Hayden, and Ed Blackwell. This one's on the ECM label. They also did some stuff on Black Saint as well. I think there were 3 records on Black Saint, actually. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe there are 3 on ECM and 1 on Black Saint. I can't quite remember. And played their version of Lonely Woman, which is a very beautiful version of it, actually. It kind of almost fades into kind of silence, actually, towards the end of it, after there's a wonderful Charlie Hayden bass solo. Very nice record. All their records are really highly recommended, actually. Good stuff.
So by this stage we were in fact getting into a bit of a trance-like state. So it seemed to make sense to have a listen to some more stuff on the ECM label. This one's Bennie Maupin, The Jewel in the Lotus. Now I know somebody, and I can't quite remember who it is, has been talking very passionately recently about this album. It really is a fantastic listen, quite different to other Bennie, well certainly the albums that came after this with Bennie Maupin. Definitely very influenced by the sort of Mawandishi, Herbie Hancock era period. But in some ways I think probably an album that maybe I like more than some of those albums. Really, really recommended. Many repeated listenings glean a lot of satisfaction. Herbie's actually on this album, but probably in his, he's really just sitting right back. It's very much a kind of ensemble piece. There's some beautiful beautiful pieces that have been recorded by Bennie. Very nice album.
For some reason, I always associate that album with Marion Brown's Afternoon of the Georgia Fawn, which I think because I bought them at the same time, and they kind of don't know, they're associated very closely with me in my mind. So then moved on from Bennie Maupin to another member of Mawandishi and took to Billy Hart's Enchance record, which was on the A&M Horizon label. Amazing, really. This was on a mainstream record. The Horizon series was put together by John Snyder, who later went on to set up Artist House Records with Ornette and Gil Evans and other people on there as well. This was a great kind of series of stuff, beautifully presented in kind of gatefold sleeves, lots of really good sleeve notes, really good stuff actually. And this album has got some of the same kind of personnel from the Mawandishi time, but also people like Don Pullen and so forth. On Dave Holland's on here as well. Really nice record. Still quite easy to find, which is quite interesting. I mean, it's not a hard record to track down. And from this, he played Rassan the Beautiful from this. So that's Billy Hart's Enchants record.
Well, staying with an A&M Records connection, and I guess also a bit of a Headhunters Herbie Hancock connection. Another airing from an artist who we shared at the last session. Again, I think with one of the worst CD covers I've ever seen. It has to be Sean Phillips with Rumpelstiltskin's Revenge. So Sean Phillips, best known in the late 60s for playing sitar with Donovan, somehow seems to have ended up with the Headhunters as his backing band here. Are doing just very hard to describe what the music is. I mean, Sean's basically a sort of a folk artist who plays guitar. He's a very good musician. He has a sort of a massive octave range as well with his vocals, and really likes to improvise vocally. Anyway, there's a track called Today, which it just doesn't sound like anything else you've heard really, and just really recommend it. It's just been re-released on CD, so worth picking up.
You need a mortgage to buy the vinyl, I think.
You probably do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, then also another CD. Played a track called Freedom from a record by Hal Wilner, which is called Weird Nightmares, which is his version of a whole range of material by Charles Mingus. Now, Hal Wilner's an interesting guy, but he's much more like a film producer than he is a record producer, and he assembles the most amazing cast of musicians and artists on each of his records. He's done tributes to Mingus, which is this one. He's also done stuff based on Walt Disney. He's also worked on tributes to Thelonious Monk, Edgar Allan Poe, and so forth. And his stuff is beautifully put together, really nicely assembled. And the track Freedom features Dr. John on the kind of vocals and also kind of spoken word. Also a weird, spooky cover, actually. Does give you a nightmare. Really interesting stuff.
It's got a sort of Don't Look Now feel to it.
It has got a bit of a Don't Look Now feel to it, actually, as well. But it's but check out Hal Wilner's stuff. It's all worth listening to, actually.
Yeah. Okay, so next up, a band that I don't actually know an awful lot about. They're called These New Puritans. I do know they're from the UK, and specifically they're from Essex, which is kind of east of London. I think this is about their third album. It's called Fields of Reeds, which I think is talking about the kind of landscape near where the album is recorded. There seems to be 4 of them. It's definitely music that you need to sit down and listen to. It's quite complex, it's quite clever, it sounds quite different. It's got a sort of chamber music feel to it at times. There's sort of some nice strings, some interesting beats, some interesting kind of electronic stuff. As John said when we were listening to it, it doesn't hide the fact that you can hear what the Pro Tools are doing. But it's really interesting and you know, very, very UK sounding. I think certainly worth checking out.
No idea how we went from that to Jill Jones, but we did. Now, Jill Jones was one that this was released on Paisley Park. She was part of the kind of Prince kind of setup, but not kind of seemed to be a fairly independent kind of minded kind of young woman and so forth, and wanted to do her own stuff as well. And this record was kind of co-produced by her and Prince, but I understand she had quite a big say over what went on the record as much as Prince did. This album's incredibly easy to find, actually. I mean, I think when I bought it 5 years ago, it cost me at least £1. So I think you won't have to spend very much on it. It's a really nice record, actually, and played the track Baby You're a Trip. Very 80s cover design here, though.
The only really real connection I can see between that and this is that they're both female artists. Annette Peacock, thank you to Big Star 1000, who I think showed this a few months back. I wasn't really familiar with this album, but I picked it up. Got a sort of stellar selection of UK session men, Max Middleton, Richard Bailey, John McKenzie, The very distinctive voice of Annette Peacock, some great songs, some lovely playing. Very nice. Came out, I think, in the 1979.
Actually, a connection with Annette Peacock and Robert Wyatt was when I was kind of fairly young. I saw Annette Peacock with Paul Bley on the synthesizer show. I mean, Paul Bley toured with an entire Moog, not a mini Moog, the whole kind of setup, with Annette Peacock singing, and Robert Wyatt was playing drums with them, and they played in London. Kind of really stuck in my mind, incredibly kind of memorable gig, really. Then moved on to Alice Coltrane, and this is kind of not one of the most fashionable Alice Coltrane albums. This is a later one that came out on Warner Brothers. It's called Eternity. Got a huge kind of cast of people on it. I mean, kind of orchestras and large number of musicians, and we played the track Los Caballeros from this. Interesting album, really. I mean, she's kind of got it's a slightly more straightened out version of some of the stuff she was doing on Impulse earlier on, but definitely worth listening to.
Okay, then we moved kind of a bit more up to date. I think this album's about 2009. The Volcano Choir. The album's called Unmap. It features Justin Vernon from Bon Iver. Actually, my daughter turned me on to this. It's a kind of quite, I don't know, experimental, electronic-y folk album. Really nicely recorded. If you love that Bon Iver vocal sound, then that's happening, although probably even more abstract than with Bon Iver. But an interesting listen. Very kind of moody, very atmospheric, quite a mellow album. Great.
Good stuff, actually. Absolutely no connection whatsoever with the next track. Been listening to a bit of hip-hop recently again. Actually, I've been off hip-hop for quite a while and played the light of Common's Like Water for Chocolate, actually. I mean, really been enjoying kind of listening to the kind of cleanness of Dilla kind of beats and so forth as well. And this is a really nice record, actually. So no real connection, actually, apart from the fact it kind of suited the mood, really. So that's Common, The Light.
And there was a really nice Bobby Caldwell sample on that particular track that John played, which was a bit of a kind of rare groove classic, I guess, sort of back in the 80s. And for some reason it just got me thinking of another kind of early 80s rare groove boogie classic, which is this track, this 12-inch here, which is Intimate Connection by the band Kleer, who definitely in the UK this was quite a big kind of underground hit. I don't know a huge amount about Kleer, except they were, I think, a little bit like Cameo, and then when all the synths started appearing, they suddenly seemed to drastically reduce the size of their band. I mean, this is very kind of soulful synth music, really.
Yeah. There was a whole kind of period then where we used to get these kind of big funk bands coming to London with kind of 10, 15 musicians, and then the following year they'd come back and there'd be 3 of them. Something like that. It was kind of very weird time, actually. A couple of Oberheim synthesizers, and that was it, actually, and that was the band. So just a few name checks and thanks, really, from my point of view. Thanks very much to Chris, of course, as ever. Both Chris's, yeah. Also thanks to Blake, who did a great kind of post on South African music, based around Brotherhood of Breath last week, and I was going to play some South African stuff tonight, but didn't get around to it, but next time, definitely.
Mr. Fatback Funk.
Fatback Funk. Anders in Stockholm carries on, just turning out great. Stefan, yeah.
Paniques.
Yeah.
Rob.
Yeah.
Mr. Fartboy.
Yeah. All good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So didn't you play another track, John?
I did. I haven't got it here, actually.
Okay.
I played some Astor Piazzolla, but I haven't got the record in front of me, actually. And I was going to play my Rare record, but I'll do that next time.
That's worth waiting for.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for watching, and please let us know what you think, what you liked.
Yeah.
Write some comments, and
See you soon.
See you soon.
Yeah.
Bye.